Just next to the city hall is one of Istanbul's oldest landmarks, the aqueduct. It was built by the Romans to carry water from the countryside to supply their city. It was a vital lifeline and vulnerable to attack. As the city was constantly besieged, the Emperor Justinian planned a reserve supply. It's there to this day, underneath the city pavements, a mysterious, eerie sunken cistern.
12 ranks of Roman columns support the roof. Altogether, there are 336 of them. In the darkness, the cistern looked as if it went on forever, so we set off to explore its hidden depths.
It was cold down there and water kept dripping off the roof, but that was the least of our problems. In the gloom of the sunken cistern, there were far bigger things to bother about.
This pillar. Oh! You can make a very good centre.
I think we're bored for this as well.
Can we have a motor, please?
Yes, dear.
Oh, you wet me.
Condensation is really...
Another one coming up, it's all right.
Now, look at that pillar up there. It's incredible that they did all that decoration on those pillars for a water system.
We lost you.
Let's go that way.
Left hand down. Pull together.
Ooh, it's very dark down there. Ooh. Quite ghostly, actually. 2. Splendid. Mind the pillar. That's it. Now we're going.
You. To spin it, to spin it.
Oh, no, we don't mind the pillar! Oh, the Romans would have been proud of you. Heading that way.
The Romans called Istanbul Constantinople and made it one of the showplaces of their empire. But when most people think of Constantinople, they remember the sultans and their exotic courts. They took over from the Romans, and although they were attacked both from the land and from the sea by Crusaders, Vandals, Mongols and Arabs, thanks to the fortifications the Romans left behind, these walls kept them safe for centuries.
But there was one man who found them no problem at all. He cleared the whole lot with one gigantic leap. And as far as is known, he was the first man ever to fly. His name was Hezarfen Ahmed Çelebi, and in the 17th century, he made a flight which I think in its own way was as incredible as the first ever trip into space. Well, he took off from up here on the top of the Galati Tower, and he flew right the way across the waters of the Bosphorus, and he landed over there in Üsküdar on the Asian side. And he made the whole flight with a pair of homemade wings. When the news got round that a man was actually going to fly, crowds of people flocked round the Galata Tower. High above them, they could see Hezarfen standing on the parapet, preparing to launch out into space. As he took a great leap from the tower, the crowd rushed forward, convinced he was going to crash. But Hezarfen flapped his wings, and the currents of the hot air rising from the Bosphorus caught him up and lifted him. Higher and higher he soared, gliding and drifting as gracefully as a bird. Sometimes he swooped down over the ships anchored on the water. Then, as another current of air caught him, he soared up and up until the people standing on the European side could scarcely see him. At last, he crossed the Bosphorus, and to the amazement of everyone who watched him, he came into land. Hezarfen had made the first ever intercontinental flight from Europe to Asia, and he'd lived to tell the tale.
And this was where he landed. And if you look back from here to the Galata Tower, I reckon that first attempt at hang gliding was a very lucky one. Mind you, the Sultan gave him a bag of gold and then immediately sent him into exile. "You're too dangerous," he said. "You could fly over my walls and capture my castles." And that was a rather sad end to the birdman's career. Mind you, I see the Sultan's point of view, because he was constantly having to defend his city. And indeed, unless you had a pair of wings, these walls were practically impassable.
The soldiers who manned them were called janissaries. Fanatically brave and prepared to fight to the death, they were feared by all who faced them.
Haydi! Yallah!
The original Janissaries were captured Christian slaves, taken as children and trained by their new masters to kill or be killed. They were the first soldiers in the world to be led by a band. Their drums and songs terrified their enemies, and many a crusader fled just at the sight of their relentless march.
This ceremonial band is all that's left of those once ferocious Janissaries. It's called Meter, which means crescent, the traditional formation they still use today when they play concerts. And it's odd to think that their strange music was the start of every single military band.